I woke up to the sterile smell of disinfectant and the steady beeping of machines, my left hand instinctively reaching for the familiar weight of my engagement ring. But my finger was bare. The diamond that had caught light for 3 years, the ring David had slipped on my finger under the cherry blossoms in Central Park, was gone. My throat felt like sandpaper as I called for the nurse. "Excuse me, my ring." My engagement ring was on my hand when they brought me in. It's a 2-carat diamond with a platinum band. The young nurse with kind eyes checked her records, asked around, even called maintenance to check if anything had fallen during the transfer. Nothing. Hospital security reviewed the footage, but the camera angles weren't clear enough to see if I had been wearing it when the ambulance arrived. The doctors said I had been unconscious for 2 days after the emergency surgery. A ruptured appendix that had nearly taken my life. During those critical hours when I was fighting for survival, someone had decided my ring was better off somewhere else. 3 days later, when I was finally stable enough to be discharged, Dad picked me up in his silver BMW. "You're coming home with me, sweetheart. Doctor's orders. You need proper care while you recover." His tone was gentle, almost fatherly, which should have felt comforting. But something about the way he avoided my eyes made my stomach churn. Walking into my childhood home in Westchester felt surreal. The familiar cream-colored walls and family photos seemed different somehow, tainted by my growing suspicion. That's when I saw her. Chloe, my 24-year-old half-sister, had just returned from what appeared to be an expensive vacation. Her skin was perfectly bronzed, her blonde hair had expensive-looking highlights, and she was wearing a white sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Ashley, oh my God, you look terrible." She rushed over with dramatic concern, but her eyes were bright with excitement, like someone hiding a delicious secret. "I just got back from the most amazing trip to Cabo. Look at these photos." She thrust her iPhone in my face, scrolling through dozens of pictures from luxury resort pools, beachside dinners, and cocktail lounges that screamed 5-star treatment. I sat heavily on the familiar leather couch, still weak from surgery. "That looks expensive, Chloe. How did you afford a trip like that?" The question came out sharper than I intended, but I was too exhausted to care about tact. Dad cleared his throat from the kitchen doorway. "Now, Ashley, don't be like that. Your sister has been through a tough time lately. That breakup with Brandon really hit her hard. She deserved a little pick-me-up. A pick-me-up that probably cost $10,000? I stared at both of them. My father in his expensive suit that spoke of his success in commercial real estate, and my sister in her post-vacation glow. Where exactly did this money come from? Chloe's laugh was high and nervous. "Oh, you know, Dad. He's always been generous. Plus, I had some money saved up." But her eyes darted away as she said it, and she fidgeted with something in her hands. Something that caught the light. That's when I saw it. On her finger, sparkling in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the living room windows, was my engagement ring. Not one that looked similar. Not something reminiscent of it. My actual ring, the one with the tiny inclusion near the setting that only David and I knew about. The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Chloe." My voice came out as barely a whisper. "What is that on your finger?" She looked down as if just noticing it, her face a picture of practiced innocence. "Oh, this? Dad gave it to me before my trip. Isn't it gorgeous?" He said it had been sitting in storage, collecting dust, and that maybe it was time for someone to actually enjoy it. I turned to look at my father, this man who had raised me, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding to David, just 2 years before David's sudden death from a heart attack at 35. "Dad?" The word came out broken, pleading. Richard's expression was cool, almost businesslike. "Ashley, don't be dramatic. You've been holding on to that ring for a year now, ever since David passed. It's not healthy. Chloe is young and in love. That ring deserves to make someone happy again." "In love?" I struggled to sit up straighter, my surgical incisions pulling painfully. "Chloe, you just said you broke up with Brandon." "Well, yes, but..." She glanced at Dad, then back at me with growing confidence. "Actually, I met someone amazing on the trip. Chad is incredible, and he actually proposed to me on the beach. Can you believe it? We're engaged." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. While I had been unconscious, fighting for my life, they had decided my most precious possession, the last tangible connection to my late husband, should fund my sister's vacation and her engagement to a man she had known for less than a week. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, my legs shaky from more than just the surgery. In the mirror, I looked pale and hollow-eyed, like someone who had lost more than I even realized. But as I stared at my reflection, something unexpected happened. Instead of the tears I expected, a cold smile spread across my face. They had no idea what they had actually done. 3 months ago, after noticing Dad and Chloe asking strange questions about the ring's value and watching them eye it whenever I wore it to family dinners, I had done something that now seemed like divine foresight. I had taken the ring to Tiffany Co. in Manhattan, where David had originally bought it, and had an exact replica made using a high-quality cubic zirconia stone. The craftsmanship was flawless, indistinguishable to the naked eye from the original 2-carat diamond. The real ring was sitting safely in a safety deposit box at Chase Bank on the Upper East Side, registered under my maiden name. What they had stolen from my unconscious body and sold to fund Chloe's lifestyle was worth maybe $300. Over the next few days, I played my part perfectly. I was the grieving daughter, the hurt sister who was slowly coming to terms with their betrayal. I listened to Chloe gush about her whirlwind romance with Chad, a personal trainer from Miami who apparently swept her off her feet between coconut cocktails and sunset dinners. I nodded sympathetically when Dad explained how the ring sale had been for the greater good and how I needed to move forward with my life. But in private moments, I was planning. My best friend Maya, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in fraud cases, met me for lunch at a quiet bistro in Greenwich Village while Dad thought I was at a follow-up medical appointment. They actually did it, I told her, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was saying. They stole it and sold it while I was unconscious. Maya's dark eyes flashed with anger. I told you this day would come. Your father has always seen you as a resource to be managed rather than a daughter to be loved. And Chloe, she shook her head. That girl has never been told no in her life. I need to know exactly what they did, where they sold it, for how much. I need evidence. Ashley, you know I have to ask this. Are you absolutely certain you want to go down this road? Once we start gathering evidence of fraud and theft, there's no going back. These are serious criminal charges we're talking about. I thought about David, about how he had worked overtime for months to save for that ring, how he had nervously rehearsed his proposal for weeks. I thought about waking up in that hospital bed, vulnerable and alone, only to discover that my own family had robbed me while I fought for my life. I've never been more certain of anything. Maya pulled out her phone and opened a recording app. Then we're going to need you to get them talking. Can you do that without arousing suspicion? That evening, I sat with Dad and Chloe over takeout from our favorite Italian place in town. I had always been good at reading people, and I could see that Dad was feeling pleased with himself, like a successful businessman who had closed a difficult deal. Chloe was practically vibrating with excitement about her upcoming wedding plans. I have to admit, I'm curious about the logistics, I said, picking at my chicken parmigiana. I mean, where do you even go to sell something like that? I wouldn't have the first clue. Dad's chest puffed up with pride. Well, fortunately, I have connections in the jewelry business. Sterling Jewelers downtown has been family-owned for 3 generations. Harold Sterling is an old friend, and he gave us a very fair price. Really? How much is fair for something like that? I kept my tone light, conversational. $35,000, Chloe chimed in, unable to contain herself. Can you believe it? I mean, I knew it was valuable, but wow. I nearly choked on my wine. $35,000 for a ring worth less than the cost of dinner for 4 at a decent restaurant. Harold Sterling had either been completely fooled or was in on the deception, but either way, this was going to be a bigger mess than I had anticipated. Dad reached over and patted my hand. I know this is hard, Ashley, but that money is going toward Chloe's future. A young woman in love deserves to start her marriage with some security. And honestly, sweetheart, you've been dwelling on the past too long. David wouldn't want you holding on to material things when you could be helping family. The audacity of using my dead husband's memory to justify their theft was almost impressive in its shamelessness. But I just nodded and smiled, secretly grateful for every word they were giving me on Maya's recording app, which was running in my purse. Over the following week, I gathered more evidence. I screenshot every social media post from Chloe's trip, including the ones where she accidentally showed receipts from the resort, the expensive spa treatments, and the first-class flights. Maya helped me research Sterling Jewelers and discovered that Harold Sterling Jr. had a reputation for asking fewer questions than he should when the price was right. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young man named Mike knocked on Dad's door one evening while I was there. He was maybe 28, dressed in a nice but not expensive suit, holding a small jewelry box and looking absolutely devastated. Mr. Howe. Morrison? He said when Dad answered the door. My name is Mike Rodriguez. I bought an engagement ring from Sterling Jewelers last week, and I need to talk to you about it. Dad's face went pale. I'm sorry. I think there's been some mistake. I don't know what you're talking about. But Mike pushed past him, and I could see Chloe in the living room behind us, frozen like a deer in headlights. There's no mistake. Harold Sterling told me you sold him this ring. He opened the box to reveal the cubic zirconia replica, then pulled out a piece of paper. This is the gemological report. The stone is fake. It's worth maybe $200. The silence in the room was deafening. Dad opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, while Chloe's face cycled through confusion, realization, and growing panic. But that's impossible, Chloe stammered. That ring belonged to Ashley's husband. It has to be real. All 3 of them turned to look at me, and I realized this was the moment everything would change forever. I could pretend to be as shocked as they were, could play the victim one more time. Or I could finally show them exactly who they had been dealing with. I stood up slowly, my recovery finally complete enough that I could move with confidence again. Actually, Mike, I think I can clear this up. I walked to the kitchen and returned with a folder Maya had helped me prepare. You see, there seems to be some confusion about which ring was which. I opened the folder and pulled out documents: the original certificate of authenticity from David's purchase, the receipt from the CZ replica I had commissioned, and most importantly, photos of both rings side by side that clearly showed the differences visible only under magnification. The ring you bought, Mike, and the one my father sold to Harold Sterling, was a replica I had made 3 months ago. I was concerned about wearing something so valuable every day, so I had a backup made. Unfortunately, it seems my father and sister took the replica from my jewelry box while I was unconscious in the hospital, thinking it was the original. Mike looked confused but relieved. So where's the real ring? I pulled out one final document: the safety deposit box rental agreement from Chase Bank. Safe and sound, where it's been for months. The explosion of voices was immediate. Chloe started crying, insisting she had no idea it was fake. Dad began blustering about how I should have told them, how this was all a misunderstanding. But their panic was telling. If this had really been an innocent mistake, they would have been relieved that the real ring was safe. Instead, they were terrified about the implications. Mike was less forgiving. Mr. Howe, Morrison, I don't care if it was a misunderstanding. You sold me a fake ring for $35,000. That's fraud. And if you took it without your daughter's permission while she was in the hospital, that's theft. Now hold on. Dad tried to regain control. We're family. We can work this out. Ashley, tell him this was just a family misunderstanding. I looked at my father, this man who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework, who had also apparently taught me that family loyalty was a one-way street. The problem, Dad, is that it wasn't a misunderstanding. You knew you didn't have permission to take anything from my jewelry box. You knew I would never have agreed to sell David's ring. You did it anyway because you thought I was too weak, too grateful for your help, to ever stand up to you. Maya arrived 20 minutes later, having been on standby for exactly this scenario. She had already called the police, and when they arrived, the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the financial records of Chloe's sudden, expensive vacation immediately following the ring sale, and Mike's testimony about being sold fraudulent goods created an airtight case. Dad was arrested for theft and fraud. Chloe was arrested as an accessory, since she had knowingly benefited from the proceeds of theft and had helped create the conditions for the fraud by wearing the ring in public and claiming it as her own. The expressions on their faces as the handcuffs went on would stay with me forever. Not anger, not indignation, but genuine shock that there were consequences for their actions. The legal proceedings took months, but Maya had been right about the strength of our case. Dad was convicted on both charges and sentenced to 2 years in prison, though he served only 14 months. His real estate license was revoked, and his reputation in the business community was destroyed. The local newspapers picked up the story, and "Man steals from unconscious daughter" wasn't the kind of headline that led to character references. Chloe received 18 months probation and 200 hours of community service. Her social media presence, which she had been trying to monetize as an influencer, collapsed overnight when the story broke. Chad, her whirlwind romance, disappeared as soon as her name started appearing in connection with fraud charges. The engagement that had supposedly justified stealing my ring lasted about as long as her tan from Cabo. Harold Sterling Jr. faced his own legal troubles for purchasing goods he should have known were stolen and for failing to properly verify their authenticity before reselling them. His family's 3-generation business was forced to close after the publicity destroyed their reputation. Mike, thankfully, was made whole. The court ordered full restitution from Dad's assets, which meant selling the house I had grown up in. I felt a pang watching it go to strangers, but it was complicated by relief that I would never have to walk through those rooms again and remember the betrayal. Maya helped me navigate the civil suits as well. Beyond the criminal restitution, I sued both Dad and Chloe for emotional distress and punitive damages. Dad's savings, his retirement account, and the proceeds from the house sale went toward paying what the court determined he owed me for the violation of trust and the trauma of being robbed while unconscious. But the most satisfying victory wasn't financial. It was the day I walked into Chase Bank, opened my safety deposit box, and slipped David's real ring back onto my finger. The diamond caught the fluorescent light exactly the way I remembered, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. 6 months after the trial ended, I stood in the living room of my new apartment on the Upper West Side. It wasn't huge, but it was mine, paid for with the settlement money and my own savings from my job as a marketing director. The windows faced west toward the Hudson River, and on clear evenings I could watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Maya came over for dinner that night, bringing a bottle of champagne and takeout from the Thai place we both loved. We sat on my couch, looking out at the city lights, and she raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to never letting anyone make you feel small again." I touched David's ring with my thumb, a habit I had developed over the years. You know what the strangest part is? I thought I would feel guilty about what happened to them, but I don't. They made their choices. You gave them every opportunity to do the right thing, Maya reminded me. Even after they stole from you, even after they sold your most precious possession, you would have been satisfied with an apology and having the ring back. It was their decision to keep lying, to keep justifying what they had done. She was right. In the days after I discovered the theft, before Mike showed up at the door, I had imagined confronting them directly. I had scripted conversations where they broke down in tears, apologized, and somehow made it right. But every interaction had shown me that they felt entitled to what they had taken, that my grief and my attachment to David's memory was an inconvenience to be managed rather than respected. I keep thinking about what David would say about all this, I said. He always believed people showed you who they really were if you paid attention. I just wasn't ready to see it before. The truth was that the signs had been there for years. Dad's tendency to make financial decisions for the family without consultation. Chloe's assumption that other people's resources were available to solve her problems. The way they both treated my emotional needs as secondary to their practical concerns. I had excused it as family dynamics, as generational differences, as anything other than what it actually was. A fundamental lack of respect for me as a person. Maya stayed until almost midnight, and after she left, I sat alone in my quiet apartment, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the fragile peace of someone trying to keep others happy, but the solid contentment of someone who had finally learned to put herself first. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, wondering if it was Dad or Chloe trying to reach out. But it was from my cousin Jennifer in California, David's sister, who had been following the case from afar. Saw the news that everything is finally settled. David would be so proud of how you handled all this. You were always stronger than you knew. Love you. I smiled and typed back a thank you, then set the phone aside. Tomorrow I had a job to get back to, friends to see, a life to live. For the first time since David's death 2 years ago, I felt excited about the future rather than just resigned to enduring it. The ring on my finger caught the light from the street lamp outside my window, and I made a promise to both David and myself. Never again would I let anyone convince me that my feelings, my boundaries, or my treasures were less important than their convenience. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most willing to betray that love when it suits their purposes. But I had also learned that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. Strong enough to seek justice instead of just acceptance. Strong enough to rebuild my life on my own terms. And strong enough to honor David's memory not by holding on to pain, but by refusing to let anyone diminish the love we had shared. As I got ready for bed that night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw someone I had almost forgotten existed. Ashley Rodriguez, the woman who had fallen in love with David, who had built a career she was proud of, who had dreams and opinions and the courage to fight for what mattered to her. For too long, that woman had been buried under the weight of grief and the expectations of people who saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. But she was back now. Scarred but stronger, and ready for whatever came next.